All right, guys, we're going to be doing a fractions review this week. And so our mission is I can simplify, convert, and perform operations with fractions and mixed numbers. So I want to walk through some of the problems that you're going to encounter when you get into this particular section that we're going to be looking at. Again, this is 3 lessons, so there's quite a bit here, but we're going to go through it pretty quickly. So the first thing that you might be asked to do is you might be asked to simplify fractions. So let's just start with number 1. And we'll say it's 110 over 76. Okay, so one of the things you notice when you're simplifying this is you're trying to figure out what you could divide out of it, right? So you can see that there's a 6 here and a 0 here. So I know right off the bat that I could divide this by 2 at least. Both of these are even numbers, okay? So if I divide both of these by 2, I'm going to end up with 110 divided by 2 is 55, and 176 divided by 2 is 88, okay? And as soon as I see this, I know right off the bat that obviously I got 5s and 8s everywhere, right? So I think probably that this could be divided by 5 and this could be divided by 8. So if we do that, we're going to figure out that both of these are divisible actually by 11, okay? So if I divide one more time and divide these two things by 11, I'm going to figure out that that is 5 divided by 8. Now, I have put a link to a great tool that you could use to help you with some of these problems, okay? And that is the Desmos Scientific Calculator. It's a calculator that you can get online anywhere. Actually, you can get an app on your phone for this as well. So it's a pretty cool little app. And so in this case here, you notice that there's a fraction symbol right here. I could bring that fraction symbol up and go ahead and type that fraction in that I was looking at, 110 divided by 176. And notice over here, it's given me a decimal answer. But you also notice right beside of it, it says convert to fraction. If you hover over it, it says convert to fraction. And so if I do that, look at there, it will go ahead and convert that for me to 5/8. So that's really easy, real easy way to get some help here on these fractions. So let's look at a few more. Here, we're also number 2, we'll call it, is we're asked to convert from a proper fraction to an improper fraction. So if I'm given 4 1/3, how do I make that an improper fraction? Well, it's actually pretty easy. All you really have to do is, for example, you would take this 3, multiply it times the 4. Okay, so that's going to give you 12. 3 times 4 is 12. And then you add the number that's up top. Okay, so multiply the denominator times the whole number, and then add to that the numerator. So 4 times 3 is 12. 12 plus 1 is 13. Would become my new numerator, and my denominator just stays the same. So 13/3 would be my answer for this one. All right. So now let's move it on up here, and let's look at number 3. In number 3, we're converting an improper fraction to a proper, so it's just the reverse of what we just did. So if I'm given 18 over 11, now what I'm going to do is basically I'm going from this back to this, okay? So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to see how many times 11 will go into 18 evenly. Well, we know that it'll only go into 18 one time evenly, and 11 times 1 would be 11. And so then I ask myself, well, how many would I have left over? Think about it in terms of a remainder, if you remember doing a remainder back way back. And so if I took 18 minus 11, that would give me 7 as a remainder. And then again, my denominator just stays exactly the same as it was. So my answer here would be 1 7/11. Okay, so let's talk about number 4. Number 4, you're asked what symbol needs to go in for each particular problem. So let me give you an example. You've got 4 divided by 12, and then you have 2 divided by 4. That may be a little bit hard to see exactly what we need to do here, which one's greater than or less than. So maybe the first thing we need to do is try to simplify this fraction. Well, we know that 4 will go into 12 3 times, and 4 will go into itself 1 time. So I could simplify that as 1/3. And then for 2/4, I know that 2 will go into both of these numbers. So that would actually simplify to 1/2. Now you might initially think, well, 1/3, 3 is bigger than 2, so that has to be greater than. But I want you to just think about this for just a second. What if we drew a little circle, and we split this one in half, okay? So that represents a half. This one, I'm going to have to split into thirds. And if I'm talking about 1/3, I'm talking about this. Now, which one of these is greater? Actually, the half is actually greater than 1/3. So actually, this is not correct. That should actually be less than, okay? So 1/3 should actually be less than 1/2. Now, there's another way we could do this. You could also get this fraction here to where it had the same denominator that this one did. So in other words, if I could somehow get this to have a denominator of 12, then I could compare those pretty easily. Well, let's look at this. 4 times what gives me 12? Well, 4 times 3 gives me 12. So I'm going to multiply this 2 times 3, which makes 6/12. 6/12 is the same thing as 2/4, which is the same thing as 1/2, okay? But what really happens here is now I have the same denominators. So now that I've got the same denominators, all I have to do is just focus on these top numbers. Well, we know that 4 is less than 6. And so we would know to put a less than symbol right there, okay? So these 4 questions is what's going to be on your first lesson, okay? Now we're going to move on to adding and subtracting fractions and mixed numbers, okay? So now let's talk about if I had 7/12, we'll call this number 5. 7/12 subtracting 1/4, okay? Now, remember, one of the rules for adding and subtracting fractions is that you actually have to have common denominators in order to be able to do that. And when we were in grade school, we would kind of write these problems out like this. We would write them vertically, not horizontally, okay? And what we would do is we would try to find common denominators. Well, we know the common denominator between 4 and 12 would actually be 12, okay? And so the 7 is just going to stay the same like it is, but this one over here is actually going to change. It's going to convert to a different fraction. So 4 times what gives me 12? Well, that would be 3. And so then 3 times 1 gives me what? It gives me 3. So that's how I convert 1/4 into something that has a denominator of 12. And now that I have the same common denominators, now I can just simply subtract my fraction. Now remember, when you add or subtract fractions, that you keep the same denominator. So it's still going to be 12, but I'm going to take the 7 minus the 3, which is going to be 4. But is that a simplified fraction? Uh-oh, it's not completely simplified, right? There's still some like terms here. So 4 will go into 4 one time, and 4 will go into 12 3 times. So this would be my final answer, okay? Now let's look at adding improper fractions. So if I add improper fractions, I've got 1/2 plus 2/15. Uh-oh. So I'm looking for, again, a common denominator. Well, I've got a 2 and a 15. Okay, there's not really a common denominator between those two. My only factors of 2 is 1 and 2, and my factors of 15 is 1 and 15 and 3 and 5. So none of those really work out. So sometimes you just have to multiply the two numbers together in order to get a common denominator. So here's what I mean by that. 2 times 15 is 30, and 2 times 15 again is 30. So now that would become my common denominator that I'm going to use. But I have to convert these fractions based on this new common denominator. So 2 times what is 30? That's 15. Then I take 15 times 1, and that equals 15. So 15/30 is the same thing as 1/2. Now over here I have 15 times what equals 30. Well, 15 times 2 equals 30. So now up here I'm going to have to do 2 times 2 times the numerator that I already had here. And 2 times 2 is 4, okay? So now that I've got common denominators, all I have to do is just add those. And again, you keep the denominator the same. You do not add this up. This is not 60, all right? You keep that common denominator, and so all you add is the top, the numerator. So 15 plus 4 equals 19. So 19 over 30 would be my answer. All right, let's move on to number 7. Number 7 is going to be 4 6/11 minus 1 3/22. Oh my goodness. Again, probably the best way to try to attack this is to actually write it horizontally. And at least that's the way it makes sense to me. And so I'm going to write it horizontally here. And I'm going to go ahead and take care of my whole numbers first. So 4 minus 1 equals 3. But now here, I'm going to have to do the same thing I did a few minutes ago. I'm going to have to find a common denominator. You notice I've got 11 and 22. Okay? So just by looking at that, I can kind of figure out that 22 would be a good common denominator. So I'm going to keep the 3 right there. And 11 times 2 would get me 22. So I'm going to take 6 times 2 to make this an equivalent fraction. So 6 times 2 is going to make 12. And here I just need to subtract. Again, I'm going to keep my denominator the same of 22. And I've got 12 minus 3, which is 9. And that fraction cannot be simplified anymore. So this would be my answer for number 7. Now let's look at number 8. I know I'm going quick. If you need to pause the video, you can do that as well. I just didn't want to make the video super long. So I've got 2 1/2 plus 3 1/8. Now this time I'm gonna do it horizontally. That way you can kind of get the idea of how to do that as well. So the first thing I'm going to do, I know I've got to get common denominators because these are not common right now. The whole numbers are just going to stay the same. So I have 2 plus 3. Of course, you heard the bell there. It's okay. I'm going to let you know that I'm at school right now. All right. And so a common denominator between this 2 and this 8 would actually be an 8. So I'm going to go ahead and put that common denominator on both of them. Here, I can just carry the 1 down. Okay, because it's already got the common denominator of 8. Here I've got to think about, okay, 2 times what will make 8? Well, I need to multiply times 4. So that means I've also got to multiply the top times 4. So 1 times 4 is actually 4. And now I've got everything I need to do to add this together. So again, I'm going to take my whole numbers first. 2 plus 3 equals 5. And then I can take my fractions and add those together. Again, I've got a common denominator of 8. 4 plus 1 would equal 5. So 5 and 5/8 would be my answer. Okay? Last but certainly not least, let's talk about multiplying and dividing fractions. And so we're going to have 4 more problems that we're going to look at. So only 4 more problems to go, and then you've got this over with. So number 9, we have 5/6 times 7/10. Okay? Now here's what I want you to understand. You could either multiply, then simplify, or you can do the opposite. You can simplify, then multiply. I'm going to actually show you both, okay? So when you multiply fractions, really all you have to do is just multiply straight across. And so 5 times 7 would be 35. And 6 times 10 would be 60. Now, once you get to this point, you got to think, okay, can this, in fact, be simplified? Well, you notice you have a 5 here, units digit, and you have a 0. If you have a 5 and a 0, then you know that 5 will go into both of these numbers. So 35 divided by 5 is going to equal 7. And 60 divided by 5 is going to equal 12. And now I have 2 factors that can't divide into one another, and so I'm finished. That may be the way you want to do that. You can also simplify, then multiply, okay? So let me show you exactly what I mean. What I mean by that is this. We have 5 divided by 6 times 7 divided by 10. If I look here, I notice that I have some commonality here between a 5 and a 10. Those are divisible by one another. So watch what happens. 5 divided by 5 is actually 1. And 10 divided by 5 is actually 2. So I've simplified before I've multiplied. I've not done any kind of multiplication yet. I've just simply simplified this particular fraction. So notice what I can do now. Now I can multiply straight across just like I did up here. But the only difference is I'm doing it as my second step. Notice what happens. 1 times 7 is 7. 6 times 2 is 12, and voila, I am already there, okay? I didn't even get this 35 over 60 answer at all. So that's one method that you can use to very quickly simplify fractions. You may or may not want to do that. You may just want to multiply straight across and then try to figure it out. That's fine as well. Either way will work. All right, so let's look at number 10, because in number 10, we're going to divide fractions. So 1/3 divided by 4/5. 1/3 divided by 4/5. So what you need to remember here is KFC. Now, I love chicken, especially Kentucky Fried Chicken. And so when you're talking about dividing fractions, you need to think about chicken, okay? Maybe I could draw a chicken leg over here, but it wouldn't look very good. So what this means is, this means keep, flip, and change, okay? Keep, flip, change. So what that means is you're going to keep the first fraction, which is 1/3. You're going to flip your other fraction. Instead of 4/5, it's going to be 5/4. And you're going to change it to multiplication, okay? So all you're really doing with a division problem is you're changing it into a multiplication problem. And now from this point, again, all we have to do is the same step we did on problem number 9. We just multiply straight across. So 1 times 5 is 5, and 3 times 4 is 12. There is my answer for that particular division problem. All right, 2 more to go. Stick with me. Number 11 is going to be 1 1/2 times 4 1/6. 1 1/2 times 4 1/6. Oh my goodness. Now we've got a mixed number. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you that you're going to use what you've previously learned to be able to do this. You have to convert mixed numbers to improper fractions in order to be able to multiply them, okay? So again, we're going to take 2 times 1, which is 2. We're going to add the 1 to it. So 2 plus 1 is 3, and I'm going to keep that same denominator, okay? I'm going to multiply that times 6 times 4, which is 24, and then I'm going to add the 1 to it. That was my numerator, so it's 25/6, okay? And again, I can multiply straight across like I have been doing before, or I can also look diagonally right here. And you notice that 3 and 6 are common terms. So 3 will go into 6 or into 3 one time, and it will go into 6 2 times. And now all I have to do is multiply straight across. 1 times 25 is 25. 2 times 2 is 4. And there is my answer. Except now, look, my original problem was a mixed number. So that means I need to convert this to a mixed number. Well, I know how to do that because I did it up above. I need to see how many times 4 will go into 25. Well, 4 will go into 25 6 times evenly, and you will have 1 left over. So 1 becomes the numerator, 4 becomes the denominator. So my final answer here would be 6 1/4. All right, last but certainly not least, number 12 would be 5 2/3 divided by 11. Again, I've got to convert this to mixed numbers before I could actually do this problem. I'm sorry, I've got to convert it to improper fractions. So 3 times 5 is 15. 15 plus 2 is 17. So 17 divided by 3 divided by, now I need to make this a fraction, right? Well, I can make any number a fraction by putting it over 1. So I've got 17 divided by 3 divided by 11/1, right? 17/3 divided by 11/1. And again, this is a division problem. How do we handle that? KFC. Think of chicken. So keep, flip, and change to multiplication. And now all we have to do is multiply straight across. 17 times 1 is 17. 3 times 11 is 33. And ladies and gentlemen, right there, we have our answer for that one. Okay? Hopefully this has been helpful. Again, pause the video if you need to. Go back and look at the lessons that are on Study Island. Again, I want you to do the actual practice. But if you want to go back and look at the lessons, they have it live examples there as well. Okay? And obviously, if you need help, make sure to reach out to me or Miss Willer, and we'd be glad to help you.